told you not to buy this market rally, right? What did I say all along, and what do I continue to stand by? This is really a trader's market in this environment right now because there are so many problems. There are so many fundamental problems that have barely been exposed. We saw the market trade-off yesterday. I suspect more volatility as we go into the big speech from the Federal Reserve Chair on Friday. Meanwhile, Fauci has resigned. Wow, you never thought you'd see that day coming, huh? Little intel on that entire situation for you coming up. Good to have you here, everyone. I'm Trish Regan. This is the Trish Regan Show. Portions of today's broadcast are brought to you by Legacy Precious Metals. There's never been a better time to invest in precious metals with all this inflation than now. So go to legacypminvestments.com for more. Again, legacypminvestments.com. All right, let's turn first to the markets because I expect we're going to see a lot more choppiness as we go into Friday. The expectation now is for Jerome Powell to tell us that he's going to do whatever he needs to do in order to cure this inflation problem. The problem is, I'm not convinced. I don't think investors are convinced that he can even do what he needs to do. You know, on the one hand, that could be good for markets, right? Because they'd say, oh, well, you know, he's never going to do what he really needs to do, which is hike rates a lot for the foreseeable future because that will cause a recession. Not great going into November. So he's going to chicken out. And of course, theoretically, the market would like that unless common sense finally catches up with people and they recognize that if he doesn't do what he needs to do in the right amount of time, that means more problems down the road. Meanwhile, if he actually tries to get a handle on this, it will actually result in more stumbles economically. We've already gotten word of multiple problems within the job market. I reported yesterday on the PwC study suggesting that 50% of employers are not looking to hire right now, scaling back on hiring plans. Meanwhile, there was news in just yesterday's session that Ford is now laying off roughly 3,000 people. So all of this starts to accumulate, comes on the heels of Wayfair. We've already seen tech companies say that they are witnessing a slowdown. Look, it's here. I mean, the administration may not want to say we're in a recession. I may get flagged by somebody for saying it, but 2 consecutive quarters of negative decline in GDP is in fact a recession. That's what we're in right now. Maybe not a big one, but the fear is that as the Federal Reserve tries to pull back, right? Because they stupidly, how many times did I tell you for the last 2 years they needed to stop printing so much money that we would be in exactly the situation we are in right now because they so stupidly printed all that money for so long. Now we're dealing with the hangover effect. And I want to just remind you of this. When the Fed puts the grease on, so to speak, by printing, markets love it, right? And when the Fed pulls back, markets don't like it. So I've been a little perplexed over the course of the last month, over the course of this summer, as the Fed has said, you know, we need to move on rates, and has. And yet the market has continued to rally. That really hasn't made a ton of sense. It's like people were kind of blind and they didn't want to admit what was really going on. They should probably go get a job in the Biden administration. Here's the deal, guys. We're in for some choppy waters ahead. It may not be an awful recession. I certainly hope it's not, but this is a recession. The question is, how long does it take to really catch up in a much bigger way on the jobs front, on the spending front, you name it? Well, we'll get more details on Friday at the Jackson Hole, Wyoming speech. It's a big shindig for the Federal Reserve. Again, we got a Fed that frankly has just been asleep at the switch for far too long. So I'm made very nervous by them, and I'm very cautious about this market as a result. Inflation is here. It's one of the reasons why I would encourage you to sign up for AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens. You can go to amac.us/Regan, R-E-G-A-N, my last name, Regan, and you can sign up for AMAC today. This is an organization filled with more than 2 million Americans. I think there are 2.4 million Americans right now that care about our future, including the economic policy that's going to dictate our future. So they're working hard in Washington, D.C. and throughout the country every single day on your behalf, on my behalf. We need to preserve this economy and continue growing it in a way that will be prosperous for everyone. So go to amac.us/Regan. You sign up, $16 a year. You get all kinds of discounts on all kinds of things, especially travel. So you make your money back in no time. And you can join forces with Americans that care about the values that I know you care about if you're listening to this podcast. All right, let's turn to the Fauci news. We thought we'd never see the day, right? Anthony Fauci finally retiring. It's a big deal. Big deal. And it's coming at an interesting time. Only because the CDC recently was saying, we could have done a better job. Maybe we should have been more clear. We should have gotten the word out in a better way. And they seem to be pulling a mea culpa just as Fauci is leaving his position. Now, he was there, more than 40 years. He's had quite a tenure. But I think when it's all said and done, a lot of people are going to look back on that time and realize that so much of this became overly political, which is what I have said from the very beginning. You protect who you need to protect. You take the right and necessary steps, but you don't shut an economy down because you need to have an economy to save. And we have only to look to China and the mistakes that China has been making in terms of its own economy. They keep shutting it down. That causes major havoc for the supply chain internationally. Another reason not to be relying on China, by the way. But it also creates huge problems for their own domestic economy. And we've seen proof of that. We've stumbled, of course, ourselves as a result of some of the things that we did that was at his urging. So look, you can Monday morning quarterback this thing all you want, but there was a lot of back and forth in terms of information. And that inconsistency in information is what caused a lot of people to really not trust the institution itself, let alone the person, right? And that, I think, did enormous damage to us as a country, because people will still look back and say, well, he said this, he said that, he said this, he said that. And it's true. And perhaps I'm going to be generous. I don't think he'd be as generous to me, but I'm going to be generous and say, look, there was not a lot of information at the time. But the problem with having somebody who was only concerned about what Fauci was concerned about was that you didn't take into account anything else. You didn't take into account the economy. You didn't take into account mental health. You didn't think about children and how they would be affected by all of this. And I think we're going to see repercussions for years to come. You're going to have a generation of people that didn't go to school for well over a year. And when they did, they were there in kind of a very fearful way. These are things that as a society we shouldn't have had to face. And if we had a little bit more spirit of the individual making decisions and choices, then maybe some people might have been a little better off. Again, difficult to Monday morning quarterback, but I would say when it's all said and done, people will realize that massive mistakes were made. And when you have only one way, it's my way or the highway. And you need a diversity of viewpoints in the room, not just the scientists, but everyone else as well. I think that's a fair point, right? Can we at least openly discuss that without getting hit by who knows what? Anyway, I leave you with that. Lots of other things to talk about, but the big news you got to stay focused on right now, at least as an investor, is what's happening in Jackson Hole on Friday. Will the Fed promise to really and truly do what it needs to do to get inflation under control? And will Wall Street actually buy it? Or are they going to call us bluff? We'll see. Quick reminder, make sure that you subscribe to the podcast on Apple iTunes. Do me the favor of subscribing to the video version on YouTube, on Rumble. Follow me on Instagram, all those great places. I'm kind of everywhere, all over social media. It's good to have you here, and I'll see you tomorrow.